The scene is the Grand Ballroom at the St. Regis in New York. And the air is thick with the smell of 1,000 white roses and old money. We're talking crystal chandeliers the size of a small car, dripping light onto a sea of tuxedos and designer silk. It was $1 million wedding, a full-blown spectacle celebrating the union of the Sterling and Davenport families. But standing off to the side, almost hidden by a massive floral arrangement, was a woman who didn't quite fit the mold. Her dress wasn't covered in sequins or brand names. It was a simple, perfectly tailored column of deep sapphire blue. It was elegant, understated, and in this room, it was practically an act of rebellion. That's when a sharp, braying laugh cut through the noise. It belonged to Clarissa Davenport, the bride's cousin, a woman wearing enough diamonds to blind you. She pointed her champagne flute towards the woman in blue. "My goodness, Beatrice," she said, loud enough for half the room to hear. "You'd think for a wedding this expensive, they could hire staff that doesn't look like they got dressed in the dark. Is she with the catering?" Beatrice Sterling, the groom's mother and a woman who radiated entitlement, turned her head. She scanned the woman from head to toe, her lips curling into a sneer. "The help really should know its place. I'll have a word with the coordinator. We can't have the scenery cluttered." The woman in blue heard every single word. Her name was Serafina Jones. And she didn't flinch. She didn't even scowl. She just met Beatrice's cruel gaze for a split second. But in that moment, something shifted. She had come to this wedding to celebrate a young man she'd once mentored. Now, she saw the day for what it really was, an opportunity. A chance to teach a lesson that all the money in this room could never buy. Section 1, The Invitation and the Intent. 3 months earlier, a lavish invitation had landed at her minimalist downtown penthouse. The cardstock was so thick it felt like a tile. "Mr. and Mrs. Robert Sterling request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their son, Alexander Sterling, to Madison Davenport." Tucked inside was a handwritten note from Alex himself. "Ms. Jones," it read, "I know it's been a few years, but what you taught me during my internship at Sterling Financial has been the foundation of my career. You saw something in me when no one else did. It would mean the world to me if you would come." Serafina had smiled. She remembered Alex. He was a bright kid from a world of privilege who, unlike so many of his friends, actually had a spark of humility and a real hunger to learn. He worked at a subsidiary of a much larger empire. An empire that Serafina owned. Every last bit of it. Of course, Alex, like pretty much everyone else, had no idea. Serafina's company, Apex Innovations, was a ghost in the global economy. It operated through dozens of smaller companies and investment groups, so its name never appeared on anything. She was the architect of a silent dynasty, a tech and finance giant with its hands in everything. In the most exclusive boardrooms, her name was a whisper. She was the invisible force behind massive market shifts. But to the public? She was a nobody. No interviews, no magazine covers. Her privacy was her most valuable asset. She'd built her empire from the ground up, with a genius that the world usually overlooks in a young black woman. She learned early that real power doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs control. Letting everyone think Robert Sterling was the big boss at his firm, a mid-level company she'd acquired years ago, was a strategic move. It let her operate without dealing with public scrutiny. She decided to go to the wedding not as Serafina Jones, the billionaire CEO, but as the humble mentor Alex remembered. She chose that simple blue dress on purpose. She wanted to see if the kind, smart kid she remembered had survived being thrown into the world of the 1%. But after hearing the venom from Beatrice and Clarissa, Serafina realized her quiet little experiment was over. This wasn't just about Alex anymore. It was about every single person in that room who sized people up based on their clothes or the color of their skin. She took a slow, deep breath, becoming the calm in the eye of a hurricane she was about to create. Their mockery wasn't just an insult, it was a symptom of a sickness that festered in places like this. And tonight, she was going to be the cure. Section 2, the escalation of humiliation. As the cocktail hour swirled on, Serafina moved through the crowd with an unnerving grace, just watching, taking it all in. But the drama wasn't done with her. A young waiter rushed past, his tray full of glasses. Clarissa Davenport snapped her fingers at him. "You. Another Bellini. And while you're at it," she said, nodding toward Serafina, "tell your colleague to stop hiding in the corner and pass around some appetizers. Some people just have no work ethic." Serafina looked right at the waiter and saw the confusion and embarrassment in his eyes. He knew she wasn't staff, he'd seen her name on a special security list. He started to correct the woman, but Serafina gave him the slightest shake of her head. He clammed up, nodded, and rushed off. Letting the lie just hang there was so much more powerful than denying it. It let the ugliness grow, exposing itself for everyone to see. Later, as people started heading into the ballroom for dinner, Serafina went to find the seating chart. It was a masterpiece of social politics, with names like Davenport, Sterling, and Vanderbilt written in fancy calligraphy. She scanned the list once. Then twice. Her name, Serafina Jones, wasn't on it. It was a petty, deliberate, and cruel move. In their eyes, she wasn't even worthy of a chair. She could feel Clarissa and her friends watching, snickering, probably loving every second of this. A stressed-out wedding coordinator hurried over. "Ma'am, I am so sorry. There seems to have been a mistake with your placement." Just then, Beatrice Sterling appeared, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Oh, there's no mistake," she said to the coordinator, but her words were a clear shot at Serafina. "Some people just don't understand that an event like this is by invitation only. It's so tacky to just show up expecting a seat." Now she was calling her a wedding crasher. This was it. The point of no return. Serafina could have ended this with one phone call. The manager of the St. Regis would have personally sprinted across the ballroom to bring her a chair at the head table. But that wasn't the plan. No, the plan required them to keep digging their own graves. "I wouldn't want to cause any trouble," Serafina said, her voice perfectly calm, which seemed to throw them off. "Is there somewhere out of the way I could sit? Maybe near the back?" Beatrice's eyes lit up. She'd won. She'd put this nobody in her place. "How considerate of you," she purred. "Coordinator, find a chair for her, near the service entrance. She can watch from there. It's the best we can do." And just like that, Serafina Jones, the woman who owned the building the groom's father worked in, the woman whose net worth made everyone else in the room look poor, was led to a tiny table in the far corner, hidden behind a pillar, right next to the swinging kitchen doors. The humiliation was now public. She watched as Alex, the groom, finally saw her. He was across the room, laughing with his bride. He saw her lonely table, and a flicker of confusion crossed his face. He started to move toward her, but his new wife, Madison, tugged his arm and whispered something. He looked back at Serafina, gave a helpless little shrug as if to say, "What can I do?" and turned back to his bride. That shrug was the worst insult of all. It wasn't mean, it was just weak. And in that moment, Serafina knew that her lesson needed to be felt not just by the cruel, but by the cowardly, too. She sat at her lonely table, a queen in exile, and waited for the toasts to begin. Section 3, The Gathering Storm of Words. Dinner was a blur of fancy food she didn't eat and fine wine she didn't drink. From her corner, she had a perfect view of the head table. She watched Beatrice glowing with smug satisfaction. She watched Clarissa glancing over to smirk at her. And she watched Robert Sterling, the groom's father, a man who thought he was a business genius, completely clueless that the most important person for his career was being treated like trash. Then, the clinking of a spoon against a glass. It was time for the speeches. First up was the father of the bride, who talked for way too long about his daughter's horse-riding trophies and the great financial sense of this merger, marriage. Then came the best man with a few lame jokes. Then it was Robert Sterling's turn. The patriarch. He walked to the microphone with the confidence of a man who loves being the center of attention. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "It's a joy to see all of you here to celebrate this incredible day." He talked about how proud he was of his son, welcomed Madison to the family, and thanked the Davenports. It was all pretty standard stuff. An occasion like this, Robert continued, is a time for reflection. We stand on the shoulders of giants. Beatrice almost preened, thinking he was about to praise her. My own success, Robert went on, the success of Sterling Financial, the very money that lets us celebrate like this tonight, is really, fundamentally, built on the vision of one person. A silent partner. A mentor. A force of nature who has guided us from the shadows for years. The room went quiet. Who was this mystery person? This person taught me everything, Robert said, his voice booming. They took my small company and plugged it into a global powerhouse. The security my family enjoys, the career my son is building, none of it would be possible without this person's genius. He was absolutely beaming, with no idea of the bomb he was about to drop. And we are so incredibly honored, he said, his voice swelling, that this person, who almost never goes to public events, has graced us with her presence tonight. She is the true architect of our fortunes. He raised his arm, not toward the fancy tables, but toward the back of the room. He pointed directly into the shadows. Directly at the forgotten table by the kitchen doors. Directly at Serafina Jones. Climax, the unveiling. Please, join me in thanking the founder, the visionary, the owner, and the true CEO of Apex Innovations. Ms. Serafina Jones. The name Apex Innovations hung in the air. To most people, it meant nothing. But to the big players in the room. The investors, the CEOs, the people Robert was trying to impress, that name was a thunderclap. It was the most powerful, most mysterious private investment firm in the world. A spotlight swung over and landed on the small table in the corner, illuminating Serafina. She didn't stand up. She just sat there, hands folded, and gave a small, calm smile. The silence was deafening. Then, you could almost see the wave of understanding wash over the room. A famous venture capitalist shot to his feet and started clapping, his face a mixture of shock and awe. Then another CEO stood, and another. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet giving a thunderous standing ovation, not for the newlyweds, but for the woman in the simple blue dress. And you can just picture the faces of the guilty. Clarissa Davenport was frozen solid, her face as white as a sheet. The smirk was gone, replaced by the horror of realizing she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. But the real masterpiece was Beatrice Sterling. Her face went from confusion to denial to pure, blotchy red fury. The woman she'd called help, the woman she'd banished to the service entrance, was basically her husband's boss. The humiliation she tried to inflict was nothing compared to the tidal wave of shame that was now crashing down on her, and then there was Alex. He stared at Serafina, pale with shock. The mentor from his internship, it was all clicking into place with sickening clarity. He had let his mother and cousin mock her. He had seen her shoved into a corner, and he had done nothing. That helpless little shrug now felt like the biggest failure of his life. Serafina finally rose to her feet, and the applause got even louder. She didn't walk to the stage. She just gave a slight, elegant nod. It was a gesture that said, "Yes, that's me. Now, get on with your party." It was the ultimate power move. She won, not because she fought back, but because she let their own arrogance expose them. The lesson had been delivered. Now, it was time for the consequences. Resolution, the reckoning and the departure. The party's atmosphere completely shifted. Suddenly, Serafina's lonely little table was the hottest spot in New York. A swarm of the city's most powerful people descended on her, forming a line just to speak with her. Ms. Jones, a true honor. The work Apex is doing in AI is revolutionary. My firm would kill for a partnership. She handled them all with unshakable poise. Meanwhile, the head table was like a disaster zone. Beatrice sat rigid with fury. Robert was desperately trying to get to Serafina but couldn't get through the crowd of her new fans. Clarissa had simply vanished. Finally, Alex and Beatrice made their way toward her, looking like they were walking to their own execution. Beatrice had plastered a fake, strained smile on her face. Serafina, she began, her voice dripping with fake friendliness. My dear. What a terrible, terrible mix-up. If I had only known who you were. Serafina cut her off, not by yelling, but with a look so sharp it could cut diamonds. You would have done what, Beatrice? Treated me like a person. Beatrice flinched. Well, it's just, your dress was so, simple. My dress is fabric, Serafina said, her voice a near whisper, forcing them to lean in. It has no bearing on my character or my net worth. You, on the other hand, have shown me the exact measure of your character. And it's not worth much. She then turned her gaze to Alex, who looked like he was about to be sick. Alex, she said, and his name was a judgment. I taught you about business, but it seems I forgot the most important lesson, integrity. A leader doesn't stand by while injustice happens. A good man doesn't choose his own comfort over doing what's right. Your silence was louder than your mother's insults. Ms. Jones. I am so sorry, he stammered. I didn't know. You knew she was being cruel, Serafina stated, as a fact. You saw where they put me. And you chose comfort over conscience. That choice will define you. She paused. Your father's firm was being considered to lead Apex's new $50 billion green energy initiative. Robert, who had just pushed through the crowd, heard that. His eyes went wide with panic. Serafina looked right past them at Robert. That consideration, she said with chilling finality, is now over. I find the leadership at Sterling Financial is misaligned with my company's values. And with that, she gave a final, polite nod. Congratulations on your wedding. She turned and walked, not rushed, right through the middle of the ballroom. The crowd parted for her like she was royalty. She didn't look back at the wreckage of the Sterling family, now standing completely alone at their own party. She walked out into the New York night, leaving behind a silence that was more powerful than any applause. She came as an invisible woman and left as the only person anyone would remember. CTA and conclusion. The story of the Sterling wedding became a legend in certain circles. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when you judge a book by its cover, and a reminder that real power is often hidden in plain sight. Beatrice's social life never recovered. Robert lost the deal of a lifetime. They all got what they deserved. And Serafina Jones? She went back to running her empire, a silent force changing the world. Her story is an amazing reminder that a person's value isn't decided by what others think. It's decided by your own integrity, your own strength, and your own vision. Her quiet dignity wasn't weakness, it was a superpower, just waiting for the right moment to be revealed. What do you think of this story? Have you ever seen someone totally underestimated, only for them to blow everyone away? Let us know in the comments below. And if you love stories about justice and empowerment, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching.